For a brief but memorable time, the height of bedroom luxury wasn't a four-poster bed or a memory foam mattress. It was a giant vinyl sack filled with water. Waterbeds splashed onto the scene in the late 1960s and quickly became symbols of coolness and even sensuality. Couples bragged about theirs. Advertisements promised better sleep, fewer backaches, and even improved romance. Many came with built-in heaters, mirrored headboards, and shelves for stereos. But reality was less glamorous. The sloshing made sleep difficult, and leaks ruined more than a few bedrooms. Moving one was a nightmare. It could weigh hundreds of pounds. Parents discovered they weren't kid-friendly either. By the late 1980s, waterbeds lost their charm, replaced by more practical mattresses. Yet they remain iconic, evoking both the free-spirited promise of the 70s and the impracticality that often accompanied it. Today, a waterbed is a quirky memory of when even sleep was an experiment. Imagine a piece of furniture the size of a sideboard, but inside, a record player, AM/FM radio, and giant built-in speakers. This was the console stereo, a must-have status symbol of the 1960s and early 70s. Families proudly placed them in living rooms, not tucked away like electronics, but displayed like prized heirlooms. They weren't just for listening, they were for entertaining, turning the home into a mini concert hall. But by the late 1970s, technology moved on. Components shrank, sound quality improved, and audiophiles preferred separate pieces they could mix and match. The once glorious consoles became bulky relics, too big to move and too outdated to use. Many ended up abandoned in basements or sold at garage sales for pennies. Today, they stand as beautiful but impractical reminders of when music systems weren't gadgets, but furniture, blending technology with design in ways we rarely see now. Before cell phones and touchscreens, there was the rotary dial. Kitchens and hallways across America sported these heavy, wall-mounted phones, often in bright avocado green, harvest gold, or beige. Using one required patience. Place your finger in the hole for each number, spin the dial, wait for it to click back. Long cords allowed teens to drag the receiver into the hallway for private chats, often stretching the line until it tangled beyond repair. Phones weren't portable. They were anchors of communication, and the family phone was a household hub. But rotary dialing was slow, and by the late 1980s, push-button phones took over, offering speed and convenience. Soon after, cordless phones freed families from the wall altogether. Today, rotary phones live mostly in antique shops and movies, remembered as tactile mechanical devices that turned even dialing a number into a small ritual of daily life. In the optimistic years of the 1960s, time itself became art. Enter the sunburst clock, round, golden, with rays of wood or metal shooting outward like beams of sunlight. These clocks hung proudly in living rooms and kitchens, symbolizing progress, modernity, and a fascination with space-age design. They were bold, sculptural, and impossible to ignore. For a while, nearly every home seemed to have one. But trends shifted, and as the 1980s ushered in sleeker, more minimalist styles, the ornate sunburst began to feel outdated. Digital clocks, alarm radios, and eventually microwaves replaced them as timekeepers. By the end of the decade, the sunburst clock was more kitsch than cutting edge. Today, originals fetch high prices in vintage shops, admired not for their function, but for their artistry. A reminder of a time when even telling time was done with a dramatic flair. Before streaming, before flat screens, there were TV dinners. And with them came the humble but iconic TV tray. These foldable metal stands, often decorated with floral or geometric prints, allowed families to balance their frozen meals directly in front of the television. For kids, eating Salisbury steak while watching cartoons felt like magic. Parents saw it as a way to spend family time in a new, modern way. Television was no longer just a device. It was the hearth. But as open-plan kitchens became more common in the 80s and sit-down meals made a comeback, TV trays lost their novelty. They folded back into closets, replaced by kitchen islands and casual dining spaces. Today, the sight of a TV tray instantly evokes nostalgia. The glow of the tube, the smell of reheated meatloaf, and an era when the TV truly became the center of American life. In the 1960s and 70s, the kitchen wasn't just for cooking, it was for socializing. Enter the Tupperware party, a cultural phenomenon where women gathered in living rooms to play games, share recipes, and most importantly, buy colorful plastic containers. These pastel bowls and lids promised freshness, efficiency, and modern homemaking. But the magic wasn't just in the product, it was in the performance. Hosts demonstrated how burping the lid sealed in flavor. Guests left with armfuls of containers. Tupperware symbolized both community and consumerism, giving housewives a chance to socialize and entrepreneurs a chance to earn. But by the 1980s, big box stores and supermarkets flooded the market with cheap alternatives, and the ritual of in-home sales began to fade. Though Tupperware still exists, the party culture around it has nearly vanished. Today, surviving containers sit in kitchen drawers, their bright lids a reminder of when plastic was more than storage. It was a social event. Walk into a 70s home and the floor was alive with color, with texture, with fluff. Shag carpeting was the ultimate flooring statement. Thick piles of yarn in bold shades like burnt orange, avocado, or deep purple. It was more than a carpet. It was practically furniture. Kids sprawled across it. Adults lounged during parties, and couples even installed wall-to-wall shag in bedrooms for a sense of luxury. But shag came with baggage. It trapped dust, crumbs, and dirt. Pets loved it, but vacuums hated it. Cleaning was nearly impossible, and stains disappeared into the fibers forever. What once seemed cozy and stylish quickly became unhygienic and overwhelming. By the mid-1980s, homeowners ripped shag out in favor of hardwood floors or shorter, more manageable carpet piles. Today, it's remembered with a mix of nostalgia and laughter, a fuzzy symbol of a decade when texture reigned supreme, even if practicality eventually won. If you've ever sunk into your grandmother's sofa and heard a loud squeak, you've met the plastic furniture cover. These transparent slip covers became wildly popular in the 1960s and 1970s. The logic was simple. Why let kids, pets, or guests ruin expensive upholstery when you could keep it sealed like a museum piece? Families bought lush couches with floral patterns or velvet fabrics, then immediately entombed them under shiny plastic. The results were both practical and absurd. Yes, the furniture lasted, but comfort evaporated. In summer, skin stuck uncomfortably. In winter, the plastic was cold and stiff. Visitors hesitated to sit, and children dreaded naps on what felt like vinyl-wrapped boards. For many, the slipcover symbolized frugality, the determination to preserve beauty at any cost. But by the 1980s, comfort triumphed over appearances, and the covers disappeared. Today, the memory of crackling plastic remains a cultural punchline, reminding us of an era when living rooms were preserved more than lived in. Step into a suburban kitchen of the 1970s, and the first thing you'd notice wasn't the smell of coffee or fresh bread. It was the color. Avocado green ruled every corner. Refrigerators, stoves, dishwashers, even mixers all carried this deep, earthy shade. Paired with harvest gold and burnt orange, it created a palette that seemed modern and fashionable at the time, echoing back-to-nature movements. For a while, it worked. Homes looked vibrant, almost organic. But the downside soon became obvious. The green absorbed light, making kitchens appear darker and smaller. And unlike white, which looked timeless, avocado aged badly. By the early 1980s, it felt less like a stylish statement and more like a dated mistake. Stainless steel and glossy neutrals took over, and avocado appliances were quietly hauled to the curb. Today, they survive in old advertisements and the occasional untouched home, strange reminders of when America wasn't afraid to gamble big on color.